Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at making soap with a comfrey leaf oil infusion. Now the comfrey leaf has been steeped in our olive oil. Today we're going to be working with olive oil, beeswax, castor oil, grapeseed oil, and of course some coconut oil. First thing we did was to melt up our oils and prepare them. Make sure that they're at the same temperature as our lye water. Now, in order to do that, we're going to use a thermometer to check that, obviously. We're going to use an infrared thermometer today. And then, of course, I'm going to check the lye temperature as well to make sure that it is a comparative temperature. We're soaping around 100 degrees today. So once I know that the oils and the lye are at the same temperature range, then we're going to combine the two. Notice the lye water has been prepared in a steel pitcher, stainless steel pitcher, to keep it from reacting. And of course, we're using all the appropriate safety gear: goggles, glasses, long sleeves, gloves, of course. I want to make sure that all of our utensils we're using as much as we can of the materials to keep our measurements as accurate as possible. So of course, we're going to scrape out our lye container. Just going to mix that up really carefully before starting to stick blend, just to make sure that there's no extra lye lint or anything else that maybe I missed. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and stick blend. First thing to do is try and not waste any of our wonderful oils. Now, while I'm stick blending, just want to sort of give a little bit of perspective on what we do here with Elegant Sensations. We are trying to make elegant, beautiful soaps, but made with a variety of materials as naturally as we can. Now, lye, while not organic, because it is not a carbon-based compound, is something that is a natural element. And so all of our oils, all of our compounds that we're using today are going to be naturally derived. Our comfrey leaf, again, of course, is an organic material and was steeped in our olive oil to create our oil infusion. Of course, you can kind of see in that beginning picture that it was put in basically a tea bag, and then we heated our oils up to make sure that that infused just like you would do with tea and water. All right, so we're mixing our oils and our lye here until we get sort of a thin puddingy trace. Trace being sort of dealing with the texture of the material. So as we're doing this, I'm checking every once in a while to make sure that there's no extra oils remaining on top. Also making sure that I'm at the thickness that I'd like it to be. Of course, once we get to that point, I'm going to clean off all my materials. Make sure we're not, again, wasting any of that beautiful soap. Again, as we mix the lye and oil, we do have a chemical reaction taking place, which is awesome. But we want to make sure that we unplug the blender before cleaning it out. So I've taken my the bottom portion of the stick blender off, so there's no way that it can start and that we can end up with silicone in our batter. I just want to also mention the fact that these are test batches. Before making something for public use, I do make test batches, and so most of what you'll see on my channel will be test batches where I try out different maybe natural elements or maybe even just different colors or formulas before trying to actually make it for my customers. I am a locally based soap maker, and so I try to make sure that I am meeting my current market demand, but also making sure that it's fun and playful. So one of the reasons I'm testing this out, and you'll see more of these types of infusions in the coming videos, is that I'm trying to mess with some natural colorants and see how oil infusions may work differently than perhaps just even adding the elements directly to my batter. So this is a new process for me and something that I want to make sure that I test out. And once these cure, I will make sure that I test these with I have some testers that will test them out, make sure that they're working well, and see what benefits or rather how comfortable they are for the user, and how their skin feels, all those things. So now once I've poured out my soap into the mold, I'm going to go ahead and clean out my soap bowl. Again, just trying not to waste any if possible. I'd much rather have the soap in their container than having in a mold rather than having it just be cleaned up later. So why waste it? Okay, once that's cleaned up, I'm going to try and flatten out my mold or my soap in the mold. So I'm going to flatten it out a little with my spatula, and then I'll be going ahead. Oops, I missed a little bit there. So as clean and neat as I try to be, I'm still getting used to dealing with these new molds that I'm currently using, and apparently my table does have a tilt, so as hard as I'm trying, you'll notice that one side is slightly less filled than the other. So I'm going to again tap it out and hope to maybe resolve that. And again, just going to try and clean off all the separate bits on my mold, or of soap off of my mold rather, and keep it in the mold so that we can use all that luscious soap in the bars. As you can see, the Comfrey leaf did not necessarily add a lot of color, which was, I was hoping for maybe a little bit of a greenish or darker color at least. I'm going to finish off my soaps by putting a little bit of just a textured swirl on top, just to give the bars a little bit of interest, even though there's not a whole lot of color variation here. Despite the lack of color, there should also be just some nice benefits from the Comfrey oils themselves. I'm not a naturalist or an expert on plant matter in that sense. So that is something you'd have to check with someone who does know to see what benefits Comfrey might have for you. But as far as I'm concerned, I was basically looking for color, not for effects or benefits. So in this case, it looks like my color, unless something really weird happens, isn't going to change. It's just going to be a nice creamy white texture when we're finished. So we'll come back after this soap has cured, not cured, but rather sat and set up for 24 to 48 hours. And here we go. You'll notice the center of the soap is darker and slightly clearer than the outside. You can almost see a ring there. That's what's called gel phase. That means that the soap heated up and while it was setting up, and so it causes a clearer, darker color when you do go into gel phase. And it'll be interesting to see with these different infusions that we're going to try what we get. Some of them may or may not gel as much. So the first thing I try to do is kind of measure it, get an idea of what my weight of my soap is, get an idea of how wide I want to cut the bars. This is a dedicated measuring tape. I basically use it only for this. So once I have an idea of where I want to cut, I'm going to actually then go ahead and transfer this to my cutter. In this case, it's basically a miter box. You can kind of see too just the what the surface looks like and how that texture turned out. I'm going to go ahead and start trimming the sides, or the corners rather, really, just a little bit before cutting it. That way I don't have to do it and mess with it once I'm done with the soap. It's a lot easier to do this way than to do on individual bars. All of those shavings, of course, will go into my pile of shavings that I either use for laundry or occasionally, if I get enough of them, to put into my confetti style soaps. Once I've cleaned off my mat so that the little bits don't get on my soap, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on its side just so I don't wreck that lovely pattern on the top. And it just also is a little bit lower so I can cut my soaps a little more evenly. And I'm going to line up that mark that I made earlier and make sure, yep, there we go. Okay, that I am cutting at the appropriate width for the size I want. I am going to go ahead and clean off weigh off each of the bars just to make sure that they're roughly the weight that I'm looking for. I do try to keep my soaps around 4 ounces, give or take an ounce, 0.1 of an ounce. If anything, I do try to err on the positive side. I'd much rather give my customer a little more than to give them a little less. And especially since we know that the weight will vary once cured, so it'll lose weight. So I want to usually cut around 4.1 to 4.2 ounces if possible. Still getting used to this new cutting scenario as well. I'm used to just cutting the bars with a ruler. Though the miter box does give it a much more even cut, which I'm excited about. You can see just a little bit that the center of the soap, and you'll see this on the next bar cut, but the center of the soap does have just a little bit of a darker ring, and then around it you'll see right around the edges that it'll be just a bit lighter. And this again is more visible on the end pieces, so you'll see this when we reach the other end of the soap. So again, Elegant Sensations is a locally owned business, and I really strive to make sure that we are producing soaps that are high quality. I am a certified soap maker through the Handcrafted Soap Makers Guild, and I just try to really continue learning and growing so that, again, what you'll see here are a lot of test batches more than anything else, just because, again, we try out new techniques and new things that we often then can use in our permanent recipes. So one of the things that I do like to do is then I do have an Etsy shop as well, but a lot of what's on my Etsy shop are actually sort of offcuts or like these test batches. So once I know that the soap is safe to use, and if I know that I'm maybe not going to use it for a permanent option, then I will go ahead and I have some mystery bags. So these may be either test soaps like this, or the size might be slightly off from what I really wanted, or perhaps I just have decided have some older bars that maybe don't look quite as nice but are still perfectly good soap. Well, I have some mystery bar options on my Etsy shop that I'll often use for that. So it's really nice soap, good option to indulge yourself, and yet get some really nice soap. So you'll see most loaves here cut to about 10 bars of soap. The end ones are usually a little bit smaller, and so we'll cut those up for sample bars. And as most soap makers know, we will cure the soap for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Usually for my bars, we're looking at a little bit more like 6 weeks. So what I'm basically testing with these is the colorants, and then also potentially, since I have some soaps in some antique shops, being able to maybe do more of a classic rustic feeling line.
People assume that time is a strict progression of...
Pardon my phone there. So we'll do a little bit of a rustic line of soaps, and have something that you would kind of expect to see at an antique shop perhaps, but also being able to use them as beautiful colorants in my normal soap. So again, you'll see kind of on this end bar, you can see just a little bit around the edge that it's slightly lighter. Well, I certainly am grateful for you coming along today, and I hope you very much enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you again.